Hello, folks. Welcome back to Chris Wyatt Reports. Opening up today's Sunday papers on November 17th, 2024, I was greeted by an op-ed in the Sunday Times. Peter Bruce, editor-in-chief at the Sunday Times, offers up a blatantly dishonest partisan political op-ed warning of the dangers in South Africa from the Trumpist among us. Now, among the many flaws in this slimy attack piece, Bruce seeks credibility in his op-ed attacking America and Donald Trump by claiming kinship with Steve Biko. It's a bit nauseating, to say the least. And I read from his op-ed. An hour ago, I was driven past the Walmer police station in what used to be Port Elizabeth. It's in a good area. The roads are clean and busy. The shops and businesses look smart and prosperous. All South Africa should look like this. Passing the police station still shook me. It was right here that Steve Biko, who I knew a bit, was murdered in September 1977. Driven past? How? Uber? Taxi? Chauffeur? Inquiring minds would like to know, Peter. He goes on. You'd have thought that in the absence of the demolition of this ugly memory, there'd at least be a bust of Steve at the entrance. It's the site of arguably apartheid's most politically consequential murder. But there's nothing. To which I have to say the following. Peter, it's been 30 years. You enjoy your white privilege. Is there a reason you've not spearheaded an effort to raise funds or lobbied for the site to be addressed? Why have you not done anything, Peter Bruce? If honoring Steve Biko is so important, why haven't you done it? Why must others carry the load for something you suddenly deem so important 30 years later? I think that's a fair question. Now, don't get me wrong, folks, and this is going to annoy the left and the right. I'm in favor of honoring Steve Biko, but not for the reasons Bruce wants to. Honoring his memory is not about being murdered by an apartheid state. It's about the black consciousness movement that he, not the ANC, spearheading. No one should ever be ashamed of who they are or of their ethnic origins, black, white, brown. You have nothing to be ashamed of, unless you commit shameful acts. But Peter Bruce wants Biko to be honored for being murdered by a corrupt apartheid state. Now, isn't that ironic given the next sentence in his op-ed? Time is cruel, and we do democracy no favors by harking constantly to the past. Really? Indoctrinating the public with past National Party misdeeds rather than honoring Biko's accomplishment is exactly that? One should not ignore the dark episodes of the past, but there's a far better reason to honor Steve Biko's memory. He continues as he switches to America. Trump is directly challenging nearly 250 years of constitutional democracy by insisting his election gives him the right to do what he likes, and he's using a strong democratic mandate to attack the democracy that put him in office. Zuma or Malema would do the same. Well, Peter, Trump won. Trump won big. Bigger than anyone since Reagan's 1984 landslide. He's using a strong democratic mandate to attack the democracy that put him in office. How exactly? The guy's not even in office and does not enter office for another 2 months, yet Bruce claims he's attacking democracy. Poppycock. Zuma or Malema would do the same. Seriously? Zuma accomplished nothing other than ravaging the state coffers. Malema has accomplished little save accumulating wealth with no discernible basis for having that wealth. We call that undue affluence in the counterintelligence world. Now, the list of Donald Trump's accomplishments fills page after page by contrast. Also, Trump was president and adhered to the rule of law. We have a track record. So Peter's fantasy is simply Quatsch. It's German for nonsense. Peter's examples of how Trump is upending 250 years of democracy is the beef that he has with Trump's nominations for his cabinet positions. Well, first off, Trump's nominations are just that, nominations. The Senate must confirm them. Trump is free to nominate Kanye West if he feels like it. I hope he doesn't. It's up to the Senate to fulfill its role as a co-equal branch of our government. President-elect Donald Trump is appointing zealots to his cabinet, says Peter. Peter, your zealot is not everyone's zealot. He says Matt Gaetz has been investigated in the past for sex trafficking. Well, that's true, but by a corrupt Biden Department of Injustice and by angry Republicans and name-only rhinos in the House of Representatives who are bitter at Gaetz for getting rid of Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. Pure politics. The charges against Gaetz have been investigated by law enforcement and dismissed. It's strange that Peter doesn't mention that part. Hardly an objective op-ed. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is an anti-vax millionaire conspiracy theorist. Well, not exactly correct. The septuagenarian RFK was never known as an anti-vax conspiracy theorist until the Biden regime and legacy media decided he was an enemy and a threat to the political left. Until then, he was known as a successful environmental attorney and scion of the Kennedy family, who was responsible for protecting the environment over the course of several decades. Strange how that changes when it suits the political needs of others. And a millionaire? And so is most of Ramaphosa's cabinet. Why is that tossed in here? There are plenty of reasons to take issue with RFK Jr., but being wealthy is not one of them. Now, notice how leftists always play class warfare when it suits them. Suddenly, millionaires and billionaires are bad, evil, when the people saying this are the millionaires and billionaires. Tulsi Gabbard, a cheerleader for Russian President Vladimir Putin. Well, Peter, that's opinion unsupported by facts. If she were in league with Putin, she would have lost her security clearance and been discharged from the Army Reserve. You see, you cannot be an officer in the U.S. military unless you have a secret clearance at a minimum. And you can't have a secret clearance if you're colluding with foreign states against U.S. interests. Now, Bruce has no idea what he's talking about. He's just parroting leftist lies, also known as libel, when they appear in print. But it's okay. It's not libel here because she's a public figure, and you can say what you want about public figures unless you live in the UK or Germany. And his article is, after all, just opinion. He says the dangers are unintended consequences. Trumpists want a powerful America to throw its weight around. Voted in office by an electorate tired of inflation, Trump will use new import tariffs to try to grow jobs in the U.S. And if that leads to higher prices, he'll try to stop the Federal Reserve from raising interest rates to combat them. Trumpists want a powerful America to throw its weight around. No, Peter, either you're dishonest or you just really didn't get the political mood. That's incorrect. Trumpists want a modest America to focus on Americans, not Ukrainians or lazy Europeans or others. Americans. That is modesty, not throwing weight around. Trump will use new import tariffs to grow jobs in the U.S. That's also incorrect. Now, Bruce knows full well that Trump will not take us down that road. Tariffs, if they're enacted, will be targeted at trade transgressors who violate World Trade Organization rules with protectionist barriers of their own, like the Chinese communist, in a tit for tat. He said he'll try to stop the Federal Reserve from raising interest rates. What? Do you mean like Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, William Jefferson Clinton, George Walker Bush, Barack Hussein Obama, and Joseph Robinette Biden did? Unbelievable. Every president tries to interfere with interest rates. He continues saying political interference in the Fed would provoke a huge crisis of confidence in the U.S. capital markets and begin an irreversible decline of the dollar. Political interference in the Fed would provoke a huge crisis of confidence in U.S. capital markets. Hey, newsflash, Peter. Political interference in the Fed is the norm in America, and the markets are well aware of that. Begin an irreversible decline of the dollar. Now, I want to take Mr. Bruce seriously, but he makes it very challenging. An irreversible decline of the dollar. Has Peter Bruce lived for the past 25 years? Printing money has already eviscerated the dollar with quantitative easing. The growth of the deficit from $3 trillion to $38 trillion in the past 2.5 decades is another nail in its coffin. But currency is based on confidence, as Peter indicates. Now, the dollar has recovered in the past and will recover again as the U.S. economy returns to 3+% annual GDP growth. He says Trump is going to teach us why we need to be careful with our democracy, even though it's been such a poor vehicle for the delivery of prosperity for the majority of South Africans. The system now, flawed as it is, at least guarantees us some degree of accountability. Degree of accountability? Really? Like Jacob Zuma and the arms deal 2.5 decades ago, still not gone to jail. And Conla, Oilgate, Travelgate, PPE fraud, Pala, the Vreda Dairy Farm, Free State Asbestos. Shall we continue? Oh yes, gun-toting Julius Malema, farm murders, gender-based violence. Let's stop there. We all know the story of South Africa, where the only folks held accountable are small fry and minorities who are out of favor with the political left. The ANC has us in an economic mess we can't easily escape, and we must hope America and the world survive Trump. They probably both will, but it will be an ugly 4 years. To which I have to say, Mr. Peter Bruce, indeed it will be an ugly 4 years with dishonest propagandists sitting on the editorial boards at legacy media houses misleading the public with blatantly partisan reportage that is little more than uninformed drivel at best. And what do you say, folks? Is Mr. Bruce correct? Is Donald Trump a threat? Will it be an ugly 4 years? That doesn't seem to be the mood here in the United States. The world needs to take note. Political parties that have failed their populations are being tossed out on their ears. Here in the United States, in Botswana, an effort to toss them out in Mozambique. In South Africa, the ANC was humbled, not tossed out entirely, but humbled, and SWAPO will soon find itself on the outside looking in Namibia. Mauritius, the same thing happened. When political parties and politicians ignore the public, eventually there's a reckoning. Hopefully a peaceful one, as we're seeing now, but sometimes not so peaceful. And what say you? Thanks a lot, folks. Cheers.